Hey everyone, Lincoln from WallStreetZen here. In today's video, we're going to take a closer look at Live Nation's Zen Score of 18. The Zen Score can help you understand a stock's fundamental strengths and weaknesses in minutes. We've automated some of the most common and time-tested due diligence checks used in fundamental analysis, so you can use the score as a gauge for a stock's current, holistic, fundamental condition. It's not a forecast or prediction. The Zen Score is a snapshot in time of how a stock stands right now based on its fundamentals. Based on the total score and the score breakdown, you can then determine if a stock is a buy or a sell, or decide to launch further investigation to learn more about a specific area. In this video, I'll be answering questions like, how is the Zen Score calculated? What are the components that make up the score? And, most importantly, how can you use the score to make better, more informed investing decisions in less time? You can learn more about how we calculate the score by hovering over the information icon right here. We run due diligence checks on stocks' fundamentals across 5 dimensions, which are then averaged together to create the total Zen Score. The 5 dimensions we run checks on are valuation, financials, forecast, performance, and dividend. You can think of the Zen Score like a standardized test you took in school. You might have completed different sections like math, reading and comprehension, English, history, and science, which are scored individually and then averaged together to create your total composite score. The higher the score, the better. Altogether, there are 38 pass-fail checks in total. Since Live Nation hasn't issued any dividends, there are just 33 due diligence checks being run against it, which it is passing just 6 of. For more information on any of the checks, simply hover over the information icon right next to it. Before we dive into each of these dimensions, let's think about how they all tie together. For high-growth companies, like Tesla, we would expect a low valuation score coupled with a high forecast score and probably a pretty good performance score as well. Because of the company's growth prospects, more people are willing to pay a higher price today to own a share of the company, which drives its stock price up and its valuation score down. If we contrast that with a non-growth company, we would expect to see a high valuation score coupled with a low forecast score, and probably good financial and dividend data as well. For a less exciting stock, like First Bancorp, we see that high valuation score, but again, the future growth doesn't look that good as indicated by the forecast. You can think of the connection between the valuation and forecast dimensions like a teeter-totter. A company will either have a good valuation and a lower forecast, or vice versa. Similarly, companies with strong financial scores will usually have strong dividend scores as well, because they're more likely to be well-established, blue-chip type companies. Hopefully, you're starting to see how all of these dimensions tie together, particularly how the valuation score is connected to the others, and how getting context for each of them is critical. Let's head to Live Nation's valuation dimension now, as I'm anxious to find out why it's scoring 0. The valuation score is made up of a mix of relative valuation ratios and 3 based on intrinsic valuation. Live Nation is currently failing all 7 checks, largely due to its unprofitability and negative book value, as we can confirm over here with its negative PE and PB ratios. Most of our relative and intrinsic valuation checks rely on the company being profitable, and a negative book value just means that the company has more liabilities than it does assets. Similarly, the lack of profitability just means that the company's expenses are higher than its revenues. Neither of these on their own necessarily means that the stock is a bad investment or that it's overvalued. We can also examine its financial health by scrolling lower. I'm going to flip over to the annual chart. And it looks like 2020 was a very bad year for the company, which we would expect as it's an entertainment company and the pandemic wreaked havoc on this entire sector. While we're here, let me make the note that each due diligence check above has an accompanying section somewhere else on the stocks page. Remember, the Zen Score section is used to get a quick pulse of the company, while the information and supporting evidence can be used for further investigation. The valuation score is then calculated by taking the number of checks that Live Nation passed, which was 0, and dividing it by the total number of checks for the section, which was 7, then multiplying that number by 100. That gives us a total score of 0. When scrolling through a company's income statement, balance sheet, and statement of cash flows, there's a few things that experienced investors tend to look for. Assets versus liabilities, debt load, payout ratio, profitability, new stock issuances, and operating cash flow are just a few examples. We've summarized the primary ones into our automated checks. It looks like large liability and debt balances are causing Live Nation to fail 5 of 7 checks, passing on just debt coverage and profit margin growth. But wow, look at that profit margin growth, 82% in 2021. We'll make a note of this, as I'm sure we'll see it again soon. Now, I'm not really sure what debt coverage is, so I'm going to go find out. It answers the question, does annual operating cash flow cover annual cash burn? Again, we can safely assume that the pandemic was not good for the financial dimension of Live Nation. The financial score is 2 divided by 7 times 100 for a total score of 29. The forecast dimension is built off analyst projections, which we can see more in depth over on the forecast page. Interesting. Of the 8 analysts offering ratings on Live Nation, the consensus is a strong buy, which is in pretty big contrast to our Zen Score of 18, which is a much more bearish picture. Wait a minute, didn't we just look at the profit margin increasing 82% last year? Maybe that's a hint at the bull case. Let's take a look down below and see what the analysts are projecting for revenue and earnings growth. Sure enough, earnings and revenue growth look spectacular over the next few years based on these analyst projections. So that's why it's showing as a strong buy, because the analysts are making their recommendation based on their predictions about the future, whereas the Zen Score is performing fundamental analysis checks based on the company's current financial condition. Despite the strong buy rating, Live Nation is passing just 3 of 9 checks in the forecast section, giving it a score of just 33. Moving on to performance. Over the long haul, a company's stock price will closely track its projected future earnings. Remember, stocks are really just big businesses. The goal is growth in revenue and growth in earnings. Without proof of earnings or revenue growth or hope of a brighter future, investors will stop purchasing the stock and the stock price will fall. The performance dimension tracks earnings and revenue growth against itself, its market, and its industry, as well as a few other popular metrics such as return on assets, return on capital, and return on equity. For Live Nation, revenue growth, return on assets, and return on capital have been dismal, and we've already noted the company's lack of profitability. That explains its performance score of 10, where it's passing just 1 of 10 checks. We do need to take that performance score with a grain of salt though, as we've already noted the pandemic's effect on this company's business. If the analyst forecasts prove to be right, we should see an increasing performance score in the near future. If you want to learn more about how we track analyst performance and historical projections, hit the link up above to check out our top analyst video. Finally, the dividend dimension is left out of the calculation for Live Nation score because it has not issued any dividends in the last 10 years. So we can get a quick feel for this section, let's go check out General Mills. Investors look for dividends to be growing, stable, and affordable, meaning the company is generating plenty of cash flow to cover the dividend payout. These elements are what go into the dividend dimension. And we can see that General Mills is very strong in this category, passing 4 of 5 checks for a total score of 80. To recap, Live Nation received a score of 0 for valuation, 29 for financials, 33 for forecast, and 10 for performance, and we've left out the dividend in our final calculation. Adding these up, we have a sum of 72, which is then divided across the 4 dimensions we used in our calculation to give us a total Zen score of 18. That score may have seemed like it was contradicting the strong buy rating offered by the analysts, but don't forget how the 2 metrics are calculated. The analyst consensus of strong buy is completely reliant on the 8 analysts offering ratings for Live Nation, whereas the forecast is just one of the 5 dimensions used in the total Zen score. Now, this low score of 18 does not necessarily mean Live Nation should not be bought or that it's overvalued. If you agree with the analyst forecast and expect a big bounce-back recovery from the COVID-19 pandemic, you may see this as a great buying opportunity. But you may be hesitant to buy more than a few shares based on the Zen score and decide to wait a while before really loading up until its fundamentals improve. Remember, the Zen Score and its accompanying dimensions are meant to give you a quick pulse on a company from which you can launch into further investigation and really begin to form a buy-sell decision. For each dimension, whether the score is high or low, there's an explanation for why that is. The Zen Score is an excellent place for overview from which you can start gathering more context. Remember, free users can view the Zen Score of up to 10 stocks per month. For full access to this feature, hit the link below for a 14-day trial of WallStreetZen Premium. I hope this walkthrough was helpful, and if you have any questions, please feel free to contact me.